Good evening, lads and ladies. Welcome to ZeldaSpeedRuns and welcome to the Zelda 2 Randomizer Standard Tournament. I'm back in action. My name is traiLZ, as you all probably know, and we are good to go and ready for the action. So let's mute the music. Let's turn on the Discord audio and let's switch to the layout and let's say hi to one of our comms today. For now, to Amazing Emperors, there's one more coming. Hey.
Hey, traiLZ, glad to be here. Think we have a pretty exciting race coming up. jkoper versus traiLZ. Two very experienced Z2 players. This should be interesting.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey there's Tom. Thanks for joining at the last minute here. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I do need a minute to get set up here, but I should be able to jump right in.
No worries. We'll start with the race on a restream in 20 seconds, but I'm sure you'll follow through.
So it looks like we're off, and we're going to pretty quickly get a sense for how friendly or unfriendly this overworld's going to be. And it looks like we have a pretty open west continent from the start, which is always a very helpful thing, as both players decide to take that same plunge into Fairy Cave. A lot of players don't like checking the grave tiles, so I think it's pretty interesting to see both go for it.
And we have a second grave tile sitting there in the swamp, and they are not hesitating.
I mean, once you've found Fairy Cave, I guess you've taken off the downside, so you might as well keep going for it.
Makes sense to me. And traiLZ finding that key bag. Going ahead and taking early life 2.
On jkoper's side, we found the back that's either Parapa Cave or Fairy Cave, you really can't tell. And a couple of palaces. I didn't quite catch the first one. That second was clearly P4, which isn't very desirable.
Not at all. Definitely not set up for that yet. And,
It looks like the first was 3 or 6. And in the same area, we also have the town of Ruto, which is definitely the least useful town in the West. You need the trophy to get the spell, and there's nothing else of note there. So, naturally, jkoper just moving on with that town. While traiLZ is engaging in a bit more early combat, that's slowing him down for now, but we'll see if the levels he can get from this make a difference later on.
Absolutely. He got himself into quite the pit fight, and unfortunately did lose the first round, but at 150, this might be a nice little early farming spot.
Now, it's worth noting with these fixed fence encounters, you need to enter a town or palace to reset them if you really want to farm them, but I don't see very many players at all going to farm these forest tiles. They often don't have good enemies, and they're just kind of slow. But traiLZ is going for
time. Absolutely. And with like 150 and 200 XP and a town literally 4 tiles away, you know, just getting that extra early edge that can help you stay alive can just make the difference, and he's already moving on.
Whereas on jkoper's side, we found the boots in the P-Bag Cave. We located the town of Mido, which is also not useful right now, but as soon as Fairy or Jump comes into play, we're going to be very interested in that downstab. And we're just generally increasing our clearage of the southern west continent.
And we have a simultaneous death. Not something you just see every day in a tournament, especially for players of this caliber, but it does happen.
Yeah, you're in general kind of fighting against time in the early game. It's difficult not to get hit, and you don't really have the resources to extend your life, so you kind of look at it as a timer.
They haven't gotten too far. It's not like they lose a ton of time by losing. None of them has a, huge amount of XP saved up that they're working on or anything like that. It makes sense to take the risks.
Yeah, traiLZ actually just up 8 a decent little chunk, whereas jkoper, because he didn't fight the enemies in those fence encounters, just doesn't really have experience, but hasn't really gained levels on.
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard for his play. He doesn't grind early on. He'll just go ahead and jump head first in.
And man, jkoper's gotta be disappointed. He found a cluster of like 4 caves, and they were a bunch of connectors, including both ends of the jump cave and a Death Mountain entrance. That's just none of what you want to see early.
Not at all.
We actually have to worry a little bit. Between both runners, we've seen a lot of obstructions and not a lot of items.
Yeah.
You almost have to wonder if maybe Death Mountain's required as a connector.
Yeah, I was starting to think the same thing. You know, with 3 and 4 out there, you might think that maybe you might have to plunge one of those, even though you really aren't set up well for it. Certainly aren't gonna, boots aren't gonna get you very far on West Continent.
Okay, it looks like the cave... I'm going to guess jkoper had a bit of a cave identification problem. He kind of went back to this cave that might have looked like Parappa Cave early, but actually turned out to be the Heart Container Cave.
And it's a good thing
They
he
have
did.
basically the same layout, except different numbers of enemies.
It also happened to have the raft, so this Western continent that doesn't seem to have been very friendly for us early on. Gotta think that jkoper might be leaving it behind sooner rather than later.
Yeah, but have we seen the raft tile? Because that could be in the north beyond that very obstructive boulder lock we saw.
You are very potentially correct there. I don't believe we have seen the tile whatsoever, and we might still have Death Mountain in our future.
On another note, while we were focusing on jkoper's item acquisition, traiLZ located a 500-point P-bag from killing an enemy, which I've talked to traiLZ about his thinking in the game before. He loves fighting in the early game because under these flags, 500-point P-bags can be in the drop pool, and it can just catapult you ahead. Him having that knowledge is only going to push him to fight more and potentially level very quickly. Though
Yes,
now jkoper has seen the P-bag as well.
Yes, he does, and so I think we're, pretty much be on even footing pretty quickly here. I wonder if that's actually going to end up negating that early farming that traiLZ did, because with the 500 T-bags dropping left and right, like, that's just going to, catch him out really quickly.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say because we know a 500-point P-bag's in the drop table. We just saw a 200-point P-bag from killing that Geldarm as well, but we don't know how common they really are. It can actually be a trap when you have a 500-point P-bag as a really rare drop that you just end up killing a lot for little gain.
It's true. Still see both of them exploring to the north now. jkoper sees that boulder.
Yeah,
And
there's something really rotten with this overworld. I don't know what the trick is. I don't know if we've explored all the forest tiles. Maybe there's Bagoo here. There's possibilities, but I don't really like them. Just walking around with the boots might just be the answer, and that's a much nicer one than everything else.
Yeah, I take back what I said earlier. I was quite incorrect. It looks like the boots might have actually been quite helpful on this western continent.
You know, it's almost disappointing this boots route exists, because we nearly had a pretty special seed on our hands, but with access to the northern half of the West Continent, things will probably proceed smoothly with finding the remaining item caves and getting the early spells out of Raru here, and wherever the other side of Saria is as well.
Well, I hang in there because you never know what items might still be in Death Mountain that are required, so there's still a shot.
Oh, there definitely is. It looks like traiLZ actually found some southern route that jkoper didn't. Finds the other side of Saria, gets a hint that Hammer's in Maze Island, and is going to get this spell while jkoper gets the Raru spell.
Yeah. Definitely something that jkoper missed.
Raru turns out to be the vanilla shield, which I think shield's actually a really good spell. It's castable very cheaply, even at low levels, and it really extends your life a lot. But certainly it's not on the level of... Yeah, traiLZ getting the fairy spell.
Absolutely, and you gotta think back to that down stab, and then just the utility of that spell. At a cost of 75, though, so still gotta get that price down a little bit.
There's kind of the other downside of this, too, is that a common way to find the front of Saria is to wait until you have fairy if, you know, it's just proving really difficult and fly across, but we now have very strong evidence that's not going to happen.
Yep. And jkoper found the other entrance to Death Mountain. And taking a quick look around, seeing if there's anything, quick exit into probably that hammer cave, and just says nope.
To answer a question from the chat, Fairy is the highest utility spell. It's not necessarily the best, because Thunder and Reflect are absolutely required to beat the game, whereas Fairy sometimes is, sometimes isn't. But Fairy lets you fly through locked doors, it has very high defensive utility, it lets you pick up down stab and later up stab. It's by far the spell that helps progress you the most in the early game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just the things that you can do with that spell, the places you can access. You can pull it out quickly and save yourself from imminent death. Absolutely the #1 utility spell in the game. But you get no offensive power out of it beyond skipping stuff. So just everything AA said is absolutely on point.
Looks like jkoper's found the magic container cave, so I think the only other cave we haven't seen in West Continent with an item is Trophy Cave, and that's got to be that hammer blocked cave.
That makes sense, yeah.
Gonna have a clear picture soon, but jkoper's kind of noping out of there. If I recall, didn't he also nope out of Medicine Cave?
I believe he did. Chow would have to help us out on that. I believe that you're correct on that.
So jkoper is kind of taking an early strategy where he sees these early game item caves full of bad enemies, and instead of just kind of bullying his way through like I think a lot of us do, he's saying, you know, I know where it is, I can come back later when I'm stronger.
Absolutely. And traiLZ, on the other hand, has come back to this farming spot. I'm a little surprised that he didn't go get downstab first.
Well, we saw that Fairy costs 75 at Magic 3, which I have to shout out the chat for letting us know that. So he's going to need a Magic Container or Magic levels to cast.
Yes, because he has 64 right now. It's 16 per box. I even said that earlier and then just completely spaced out. So that might be exactly why he was there. He's going to reset that so that he can get the levels for Magic 4 and see if he can gain access to that Fairy spell.
It's kind of dangerous. Magic 4 doesn't reduce the base cost of Fairy, but he might just get lucky with it.
49.
And he got lucky with it. It went all the way down to 49.
Yeah. Suddenly he has a lot more utility at his fingertips.
Well, jkoper looks like he's turned his mind to bullying his way through this magic container cave. I guess he just wanted more lives and such. Killing these red Dairas in the dark with these ceilings, it's not easy at all.
No, I can't.
jkoper's doing the standard strategy of bait it out and try to deal with it as such, but a lot can go wrong, as that death demonstrated.
Yes. Yeah, like that, when he's still in that hallway, you cannot at all jump over those axes. Whereas here, you have a shot, you have to see it coming and have enough room. He gets through.
To answer the question about how spell cost works, in the Zelda 2 Randomizer, under the most commonly played settings, including this one, the cost of spells is always plus or minus 50% of the original cost, but this cost will never go up per level. So, the cost of magic is random, it goes down with level, and it's somewhat correlated to the original game spell cost curves, is the best way to look at it.
Yeah. traiLZ getting this down stab, and jkoper, by the way, found a vanilla magic container inside the magic container cave. traiLZ is going to pick up his... Yep. And
Now, I've kind of long said that I think first magic container is low-key one of the very best items to find. It's really a common situation, like what traiLZ saw with Fairy, where you have a useful spell that costs between 64 and 80, and it's much less common that you get stuck with a spell costing 81 or more, so what you can do is really pumped up a lot by that one magic container, on top of the 1 out of 3 of getting the magic container locked item in New Kasuto.
Absolutely, and the combination of getting that extra container, along with reducing the price of Fairy to 50, it's suddenly like you're just 2 jars away from being able to cast it a second time. It's very close to being like double that utility.
jkoper, I think, has been trying to hunt for Saria, and he's just not finding it. The randomized overworlds can be deceptively difficult to solve, and you can end up spending a lot of time looking for that last thing you haven't seen. Kind of unfortunately for jkoper, the thing he's missing is really important, as it has that fairy spell for him.
Yep, he is now, it's only a 3-4-3 to 3-3-3, but beyond that, that fairy spell is the major differentiator between our 2 runners. Until jkoper finds the glove in that trophy cave.
So yeah, jkoper has fully explored the West Continent and has found a lot of useful items. His only problem is he just missed Saria. So if he finds Saria quickly, he's going to have a bit of an early lead. But there's a very real scenario that traiLZ will pull ahead in the time it takes him to do that.
Absolutely. You also got to think at this point, getting that glove might make you start thinking about palaces a little bit more than anyone is. And I don't think traiLZ is still thinking that hard about palaces. But jkoper knows he's missing Saria, so he'll keep hunting for it.
Of course, the logic of the randomizer guarantees you will always have either the fairy spell or the magic key before you're required to dive palaces. So for right this moment, jkoper is not thinking about palaces, but he's about to start thinking about them real hard in about 10 seconds when he picks up fairy.
That's true.
Now we have palace 3 or 6 on this side, and because of the magic container, jkoper can just pick up downstab instantly. It would not be surprising at all for him to dive that palace, hope it's 3, and even if it's 6, just see if he can knock it off.
Yep. I think that you're absolutely right, especially considering have we seen the raft tile yet? Was it up?
Yes, the raft tile's in the northeast.
That makes sense. So what are the chances that jkoper might actually just go ahead and start exploring the eastern continent instead of diving the 3, which may be 6?
Well, we have the other of 3 and 6 over here as well, so he's guaranteed to get 3 here. It's really a tough call, because diving the palaces is somewhat secure in that you know you're going to be able to clear them. But on the other hand, there could be some really useful just free stuff in the east.
Yeah. Combined with the fact that then leaves us with 1, 2, and 5 over on the east, that sounds very, very, very much like a better scenario than me.
Yeah, it's kind of scary in a way, though, because the main factor that would have me really considering going into 3 and 6 is the possibility that I'm going to find the flute and then 3-Eye Rock is going to block 1 in the east. But you just don't know. Looks like traiLZ is going for the eastern play with that wonderful ocean road.
Yes, but traiLZ, I don't believe, has found Glove.
No, he hasn't, which is actually kind of strange because Medicine Cave wasn't in a difficult to locate position at all. It was very centralized on the southwest of the West Continent.
Yep. And like you said, you know, these maps, it's very easy to think, oh, I've been in there, or it looks just like something else, and just missed it. jkoper also taking the raft over to the eastern continents, basically following in the exact same steps as traiLZ, except a little bit better equipped with that glove.
Some of the good news for traiLZ here is that the palaces over here are 1, 2, and 5. 1 and 5, the glove doesn't matter at all. If anything,
Correct.
It's slightly detrimental in 5. And in 2, it's usually not required.
Yep. That, and then hopefully that works in their favor. Picking up the jump spell will, you know, help some as well. Always a handy spell to have.
I mean, I'm just going to say neither player is going to be happy to see this jump spell here.
I'd definitely rather see something
DP,
else.
And that's about it if you already have Fairy, which they do.
Thank you, Storgy, for the 2-month subscription. Appreciate your support. And apologies as I butchered your name.
We get to see a little of that defensive Fairy in action as it totally bails traiLZ out of a nasty Death Road encounter as he stumbles into New Kasuto. Even better, he's immediately told that he deserves her help, which I'm sure traiLZ agrees strongly with, and he's rewarded with the medicine.
Indeed. jkoper finds a mass grave. Just kind of help wonder, like, okay, what happened there? Why is the world suddenly a graveyard?
I mean, you think you're trying to stop Ganon, but sometimes you just gotta figure Ganon has truly won.
I believe that's the timeline we're in, is it not? That Ganon was not thwarted.
Defeated timeline, which probably explains why Zelda 2 is so much more difficult than the other Zelda games. Meanwhile, we get the life spell, which is a little bit of redundancy in that we have the life and shield spell both, and you wouldn't think it at first, but the two spells kind of do the same thing in that they let you trade your magic bar to extend your survival.
Yes,
but they each have kind of their own utility, so it's certainly not a waste.
Absolutely. I would say the life spell is definitely more useful overall, simply because you can carry its effects with you moving forward. However, it's usually a bit more expensive as the trade-off magic to life versus shield, especially late game.
Yeah, there's kind of a debate to be had. I think most players agree with you.
Yeah.
But something that no one disagrees with is that the Reflect spell we got out of Old Kasuto is a lot more important, as that's one of the spells absolutely required to beat this game in these settings. It's not really a very good spell otherwise, but you have to have it to beat Karok in 4.
And since we know where 4 is, and it's just sitting there ready for us, that's going to be something probably not see for quite a while, but now we definitely will be ready. Don't have to search for that one.
So if you're jkoper, you're really wanting to find all the palaces in the east right now just to see what they are. Because if we don't need the flute, he is a Thunder from Go mode, and I am certain this thought has already occurred to him.
Absolutely. he has a chance to put in a really fast time. And like, traiLZ would be in the exact same situation if it weren't for that pesky glove.
Of course, in terms of that flute, we've already found all of the free spells. We have the medicine, so Thunder could be in Mido. Oh, that looks like 3-Eye Rock off to the east there. We only saw 2 of the rocks because of how the camera is, but I'm pretty sure that was 3-Eye Rock.
I believe you are correct. So you know the randomizer logic immensely more than I do. Cannot be understated. So when you see 3-Eye Rock, is it always a dungeon?
Yes, 3-Eye Rock is always a dungeon. Just like if you have to use the hammer to open an entrance in the east, it's always New Kasuto. In these settings, it's a 50-50 whether you have to do either of those things. We got New Kasuto out in the open, so the hammer is devalued, but 3-Eye Rock is there, so we're going to need the flute to access the palace. Don't know which one, but to beat the game, you need all of them, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. traiLZ manages to get the candle in that cave before leaving, before dying. However, comes back for revenge and is rewarded with 500 XP.
Interestingly, traiLZ declined Attack 4 in favor of Magic 5. I think traiLZ is looking to get the cost of Fairy low enough so he can cast it twice. I wasn't able to catch whether he succeeded at that.
I missed it as well.
On jkoper's side, he went through Death Road, and he found a palace. I saw from the pillars it was 2 or 5. He certainly knows which one it is, but I don't. I have some worries it might be 5, but usually if you go through this road, you're willing to complete whatever palace you run into.
Yeah, except that I think that he decided to... I don't know what he's doing. He went outside to die because he had almost no health and magic. But he could have done that in the palace.
Level, wanting to up A in the palace.
Okay, that would make sense. Would that not point to 5 then? Because you otherwise would grind on the statue.
The statue in 2 always gives a magic jar and never an enemy.
Oh, huh. I did not remember that, obviously. I just remembered that 5 didn't have a magic, or anything.
The difference between 2 and 5 is usually obvious very quickly, so we should know pretty shortly.
And already having to use Fairy right out the gate, draining his entire magic bar. Gotta hope that there's not another lock quickly.
Okay, traiLZ is in 2, and he's not here, so yeah. And this room would
5.
confirm it anyway. jkoper's in 5.
Yes.
5's a really scary dungeon. It's one of the biggest, most difficult dungeons. It has, by far, the hardest boss. But I guess you kind of take the attitude, I've come this far, let's see what I can do. On traiLZ side, we see the Drippers are 30 experienced Doom Knockers. Not really that worth it, so it's surprising to see traiLZ kill so many of them.
Yeah.
Maybe he was just hoping for a jar drop to cast Fairy?
Maybe, but I think he's settling for death to get him that Fairy spell refill, which will allow him to find out what this item is.
On another note, I haven't seen any enemies drop keys at all. On these settings, that can happen randomly, and it is quite powerful.
Oh yes, I can imagine. I've seen a few of those seeds, but it doesn't feel like that's going to happen unless there's just different groupings. I'm thinking at this point, between the cost of Fairy and things like that, if any one of these guys can find Magic Key, it's going to give them a major advantage until the other can, at least for a little while.
Which is probably the thinking traiLZ has going to Magic 5. Just trying to get more out of his fairy spell. He hasn't really hit a critical threshold in terms of cost yet, but I guess he's optimistic about it.
Yeah, and that lack of glove rearing its head for traiLZ there for a second, but actually does utilize the jump spell to get out of there, and is rewarded immediately with the boss. And I don't mean Springsteen. Although there's a little bit of a resemblance.
So you might be a little confused why Helmet Head's health doesn't seem to be going down at all for traiLZ. Here's some fun game mechanics. So the displayed health bars of the bosses are displayed on their original HP, not their randomized HP, which is why they sometimes seem to spawn hurt. But due to some truly arcane internal mechanics, Helmet Head's display health is based on Gooma's health. So that massive health bar you see starting mostly empty, well, Gooma has a lot more health than Helmet Head.
And that is exactly what jkoper is having in his future if he stays in Palace 5. And the toughest boss in the game might just be that much tougher.
jkoper did find 5's item. Unfortunately, it was just a heart container, but I guess at least he knows, and more importantly, he didn't do a long dig for it. 5's item is traditionally considered the hardest item to find, so stumbling into it relatively easily and before the boss is a bit of a relief if you do find yourself kind of shoehorned into an early 5.
Alright, but now we need to find the boss, which in vanilla is not that difficult, as in early branched it's not that long. But obviously in randomized dungeons can be quite a different story.
I have played this randomizer so much more. I have so little concept of the vanilla layout of these dungeons, to be honest.
Well, I've got your back there because I have not heavily played the randomizer in a while. I love to get back to it soon. I've definitely watched several matches at this point, but I know the original game very well.
To answer the chat about how glove is or isn't required, it's random if you need it in 2. It's usually not required, but sometimes is. It's often needed in 3 and 6, never needed in 1, 4, and 5, and almost always needed in GP.
Yeah, you've
which
got to
that
think
last
about
part's
those.
the real kicker.
Yeah, if you remember, the Great Palace has a lot of those waffle rooms, as they're called often. Sometimes chicken and waffle rooms, depending upon their enemy sets. But yeah, there's basically walls full of those, blocks. There's blocks dropping, holes in the floor, things like that. There's very few configurations of Great Palace that do not require the glove.
To put into context how rare it is, I have seen it once ever.
And AA has played this a lot.
And traiLZ just located the spell. It's a pretty rarely useful spell. All it really does for you is get you the second item in New Kasuto, which is actually a really long walk. So it's traditionally considered one of the more useless finds, but you never know, that could lead to the trophy that leads to Thunder.
Alright. In this flag set, is it not combined with another spell to make it more useful?
That would be the fire spell.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've always thought that they should do spell as well. But, it's arguable which one is more useless. But most people probably still say fire.
In terms of actually dealing with enemies, I definitely prefer fire over spell, but that's a non-statement. Spell at least has a chance to be required, though, so it's a much happier find.
That's true. I still feel like spell is generally the more useless spell. Fire, I think, is probably more disappointing, because you get this awesome sound effect and this cool visual, and then it's just mostly disappointment.
Yeah, the only thing that I ever really like fire for is when you have like a rope across a lava pit and you just snipe it with fire instead of make the awkward jump.
Yeah.
And in terms of awkward jumps as well, jkoper is definitely using the safe strategy for Guma here, but I totally understand. 4-3-4 Guma is not a joke. You see, even with the shield spell, he lost more than half his life to one hit.
Yeah, he got a little ambitious there near the end, and kind of paid for it at first. Meanwhile, traiLZ did find the hammer on Maze Island. We had a hint about that earlier. Not a very unlikely to be useful, except to more quickly get around the Western continent at this point.
We did see that Trophy Cave was blocked by the hammer, so it could be Trophy and Trophy Cave. Certainly traiLZ would hope that, and would hope it leads to Thunder. We haven't really seen any evidence of what is paired with Fire, and we know the remaining two spells are Fire and Thunder, so...
Well, you also have to remember that traiLZ might be thinking it leads to Glove. Or we could find Trophy right there on Maze Island.
Yeah. So...
maybe the Child?
You're now guaranteed able to get every spell with what we have between both runners. Also, on a very surprising note, jkoper's going right back east. He's not turning in his medicine, and he's not going into P4.
I'm not surprised by this play, because you have to think. He just beat 5. He knows the other two palaces here are 1 and 2. Like, those are pretty easy to knock out. And I think that he wants to save the bigger palaces, I would guess, for more XP, if nothing else.
I would just think you'd be really in a hurry to go turn in your medicine if you're already in the West, just to see if it's Thunder, so you know when you hit go mode.
That's a good point. His head just might not be there.
But yeah, it's kind of hard to evaluate who's really ahead or behind right now, because jkoper knocked out a much bigger palace than traiLZ, but traiLZ took advantage of that time to explore a lot more of the eastern area.
Yep. And the question is going to be whether that actually benefits him, or if it was more of a distraction, because as we pointed out, jkoper is possibly very close to go mode. traiLZ is still looking for his glove, which we know he left far behind. And then we still know that we need Flute to get to 1 or 2, which neither of them have found.
traiLZ does have a lot of information about where Flute isn't, and he also has Spell, which could lead to the Flute. It's an entirely possible scenario.
jkoper is back and turning in the medicine, by the way.
I'm going to guess when he was diving down that cave, he had the thought, gee, I really should have turned in that medicine. This is a long cave to walk out of. I'll just up A. Okay, here's the intrigue. We have Fire. We can immediately see Fire is not paired with Jump or Fairy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you cast Fire under these settings of the randomizer, you get the effect of the Fire spell and also the effect of one other spell at random. jkoper is really hoping that other spell is Thunder. It would put him in go mode, and Fire Thunder is just ridiculously overpowered anyway.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's Thunder.
It is Thunder. Wow.
So, jkoper is a Flute from go mode, and he's going to be taking every magic level he can get. So I mentioned earlier that the spell costs are based on the cost in vanilla. The thing is, with the Fire spell, it has a very high cost at low levels, but its cost just plummets at higher levels. So if you get up to like Magic 6 or higher, you'll have like 10 cost Thunder, and that's as broken as it sounds. You just annihilate the enemies without even touching them.
Meanwhile, traiLZ has got his 7th magic container, so he's definitely going to be able to cast a lot of fire when he gets around to it. Unfortunately, he seems to be exploring Death Mountain, which could have Flute. If it does, it's going to be a boon for him, but otherwise, it's probably not a great use of time. Just got to think that he's completely missed out on that cave.
traiLZ did very quickly bump into the hammer cave, which is often the much more difficult item of the two in Death Mountain to find, so he could have a pretty quick Death Mountain as it works out.
Well, it did seem like a pretty friendly Death Mountain. It just seemed like a few open areas with a lot of caves. There wasn't a whole lot of chaining smaller areas like you find in the vanilla game. So, able to jump in and out of caves really quickly until you saw those pillars.
It's also worth noting that Fairy is still pretty expensive, and especially with Fire Thunder, you want to use your magic offensively. Not that traiLZ knows that yet, so if he finds the magic key, that could be a big deal as well.
That's absolutely true. Meanwhile, jkoper finds it. You gotta think that he's gonna be near unstoppable. Unfortunately, he found that key bag. I think we saw that earlier on traiLZ's side, though.
Yeah, the seat being fluid required is actually the main thing that's preventing jkoper from just running away with this, because it's likely he's going to do a lot of the stuff traiLZ has already done, just looking for the flute, because traiLZ checked the spots that you would intuitively think to check first, looking for items.
And traiLZ has also just proven out that the hammer has zero usefulness, as that trophy cave contained a pea bag.
He didn't find the hammer-blocked item in Death Mountain, did he?
I guess not. No, he did, because I believe that was the 7th magic container.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that was the
was
magic container, and he had a heart container, meaning Death Mountain was very poor, not a good place to explore at all, but at least for traiLZ it was a quick DM.
Indeed. And now I see jkoper making his way through 2, which I don't know if we said this time, was proved out to not be glove blocked. So that one did not slow down traiLZ earlier.
Yeah, and luckily for jkoper, he took exactly the same route traiLZ did, which turned out to be a very efficient route through 2. The really good thing about that is sometimes when you have those non-glove block 2s, you trap yourself by going down the glove path if you're the only player with glove, and that can cost you time. Luckily for jkoper, that's just not going to happen here.
Indeed.
Oh, jkoper has to make a tough decision where you're close to a level, but you're just far enough the grind would be slow. He decides to just place the gem. I think most stronger players would agree this is usually the correct play, but it doesn't make it less painful when you're playing.
Yeah, I think it was probably made easier simply by the fact that we're not talking about a ton of XP overall. And, you would, in that situation, he'd probably want to grind up a decent amount more in order to take advantage of getting past that 12-10 mark that both of them are stuck on in order to try and get that attack 5.
Well, I think jkoper would prefer Magic 4 to Attack 5 based on his suddenly acquired knowledge of Fire Thunder.
That's a fair assessment. So he's going to be trying to find a spot where he can get some XP, although he's definitely still got more exploration on his mind.
On traiLZ's side, he's found the item in 4, took a death, but he's about to pick this up. The item in 4 is still a mystery from us. There's a good chance this is flute. Oh no, it's just the key, which is very helpful, especially in 4. I think 4 has a higher density of key doors than any other dungeon. So this will really help traiLZ locate Karok and get on out of here.
Absolutely. And while
also, just gotta say, with the randomized enemies, that was an awful room traiLZ was in.
It really was. Those blue iron, just a pretty nasty trap there. Even slowed down his screen as far as the amount of just busyness. Oh, it would be attack 6 for jkoper. You're correct, T9.
Yeah, we still have the items in 3 and 6, which you gotta think it's very likely Flute's in one or the other, and after jkoper's done in the east, it's really likely that's his next stop. Just knocking out all the dungeons in the west, which will probably get him Flute eventually.
Well, especially now he's going to find out that this is Great Palace on Maze Island. So I imagine that he's going to try and finish out this level and then definitely go back west.
Yeah, it's kind of an awkward situation because at this point, jkoper, I think, knows he's done with the east. He just he's
quit.
shackled by experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's a situation that happens to all of us, but you always want to avoid it. Because levels are powerful, but the more time you spend on levels, kind of the further behind you're likely to become.
You also got to think that, those grind spots, as much as you might not want to focus on those, like, as much XP as he needs, even catching up might not take a ton of time versus the amount of time you're losing right now. But he is taking advantage of this time to go into some towns and getting upstab and maybe some more spells.
Yeah, picking up this spell is an easy play if you're planning to up A, because it could be spell, it is spell as we know, and he still doesn't know where the flute is, so you might as well just pick that up. But seeing jkoper go back and refill his magic leads me to believe he's not going to up A here.
Yep, I believe that you are correct. Meanwhile,
But he could
traiLZ
easily get
is
some
done in
extra time, as we see traiLZ going for 3 or 6, and it's 6. Opens right up with the worst room in the game.
Yep.
And diving 6 without the glove, you can often make it very far in 6 without the glove, but that can really just be to your own detriment.
But if you can't get far in 6 without glove, then, that might actually help him out quite a bit.
I mean, don't worry, we get to go left in this terrible room.
That's true. Yeah. Worst room in the game.
I'm sure everyone kind of has their own opinion over what rooms are really the worst, but I'm just gonna go out there and say, I really hate this room.
And it did not pay off. 6 is glove blocked.
Okay, so jkoper has found the last item in the east. I guess he didn't have either that magic container or this. He's now really close to that magic 5 level, so things might actually work out pretty well for him here.
And he's grabbing that heart container, and he's going to kill this little bugger. And that's going to be his magic level, and he is going to save and quit. Yep.
I didn't see if that reduced the cost of fire. He up-A'd pretty quickly, but it's pretty likely that fire got cheaper from its high base cost at Magic 4 going to Magic 5 there.
Yeah, I missed it as well, so we'll have to keep an eye out for that. And jkoper, taking advantage of his hammer, is going to find out that Trophy Cave holds a P-back. And not
yeah,
even
there's just no reason not to check this free hammer locked item, but
oh yeah.
I suspect after this, jkoper's got to make the play for the palaces, because if he's going to gamble against Death Mountain, which, knowing jkoper, I think he probably will, he can be done with the West Continent now.
Absolutely. You know, if it weren't for that pesky flute, he would probably just be, you know, that would be go moding. But, and he will just deal with the fact that he does not have that magic key. But I'm guessing he'll find that along the way.
Unfortunately for jkoper, and fortunately for traiLZ, it turns out that spell is required this seed, as the magic key slot holds the flute. Now, this isn't the worst thing in the world, in that that's jkoper's next check after he's done with these palaces, but this could be kind of an order disadvantage if he does long digs for these items.
Yeah. So you got to think that that time is just going to be time bought for traiLZ to remember that he did not actually find everything on this western continent. And hopefully we'll realize, oh, hey, there's something I haven't been in. Hey, I wonder if Glove's in there.
And yeah, I didn't see the exact cost, but fire cost about 1 bar, so about 16.
Yep.
That's really low.
Yeah, no, he is basically just liberally using it at this point.
Now, we do know the first item he finds is going to be the item from here in P4. And that's going to be the magic key, which, with what we know, will probably actually save jkoper time.
Oh, absolutely. Because suddenly he doesn't have to use that magic bar for fairy anymore, and he will just be a fire and thunder machine.
Of course, Life 5 kind of turns against jkoper there, as it makes taking this death to this orange iron knuckle that much harder. At least he got a strong enemy in this room. Because you often think about how the enemy shuffle's dangerous and that it can give you a bunch of strong enemies, but it can also just give you like a bunch of those little spike enemies, and you can have to take like 50 hits to die on purpose.
Yeah, pretty brutal. Oh, and then he sees that there was a better enemy to die on later if he had just kept going. But I'm sure that he is just thinking about his shiny new magic key and all the possibilities of fire and thunder to completely clear the way. You think about that same room when traiLZ went through it, we're talking about how icky that was, and he just literally hits one button, and that room is like, yeah, easy mode.
It's better than easy mode. It's here, have all this free experience.
Yeah. It's basically got him in, theoretically a better level situation now from traiLZ. Finally kind of catching up. Number of levels is equivalent. But that attack level is definitely a lot more attractive than having that Life 6.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess that jkoper is actually planning to take Life 6, and then his ambition, at least, is probably take Life 6 from experience, and then use this gem to get Magic 6.
I could see that.
Wizrobes and the fire-dropping Moas are only worth 50 each. That's a pretty low roll for both.
Yeah, no, you got to think that he was going in there thinking that he was about to get really handsomely rewarded, and then suddenly just sees 350s pop up on screen. Luckily, it only cost him 1 bar of magic, so still not too shabby overall, but certainly not quite the payoff he was hoping for.
Yeah, I don't remember how much Karok was worth. jkoper doesn't know anyway. He's really just hoping that he's going to be able to get Life 6 by points and not basically lose a level. If he does just lose a level, I assume he's just going to suck it up, but it's on his mind, I can promise you that.
And he's going to see how much he gets out of this, and then he's got to be thinking about that pea bag that he just left behind. Doesn't want to waste the time getting it if he doesn't have to.
Yeah, I would assume if this is worth a lot, he's going to go back for the P bag and see if it puts him over the top. Like that 700.
Yeah, he's going back.
Even if it's a 50 bag, you get it.
And there's that level. Meanwhile, traiLZ is fighting Guma.
Now, something I find surprising from traiLZ is that he went through Death Road and did Palace 5 before checking what the flute block dungeon was and just clearing P1.
It's true, but he didn't. Don't know what else to say there. But he's gonna clear out Guma and get his next crystal set. And yeah, not exactly the biggest payout for this, but he does go up to attack 5 now. Very traditional levels for our runners at this point.
traiLZ is going back into 5 digging for the item. jkoper found this item very easily, so I don't anticipate a long dive for this, but this is one of those time on the table digs because we don't know what this is, but we do know it's not any good.
And a little too late, but we did just see an enemy did drop a key, so that is the thing you were talking about earlier. Can happen in this randomizer. If they did not have magic keys, you got to think that they might kind of pause at that and think about taking advantage of that. But
yeah,
since they
we
both
saw
have
it
magic
was a
keys-
drop from a large enemy. It was a Iron Knuckle that dropped it. Those are often harder drops to farm, and I'm guessing that key was just really late in the drop queue.
Yeah, you're very likely right on that, and somewhat inconsequential at this point. It's fun to speculate.
Yeah, jkoper's being really conservative with Thunderfire, which is surprising. It's often my preference to hit that button early and often. Maybe he's worried about getting stuck, unable to cast Fairy. And Fairy is often required all of a sudden in Palace 6.
Absolutely, yeah. And it just doesn't feel like he's as concerned about XP at this point.
A minor mistake from our tracker, marking the boss in 3 when its duplicate in 6 was killed. That was, It's technically correct. jkoper did kill a Rebonek.
Just not that one. Do thank our trackers for their work here. It is not an enviable job. Definitely appreciate that. And jkoper seems to have absolutely taken your choices to heart. He got beyond the point of having enough magic to do Fairy and just decided to kind of go ham. And wow, that was a lucky magic jar drop right there.
Yeah, meanwhile, traiLZ has located the item out of P5, saw his disappointment, and is ready to move on. And yeah, it's definitely the case that jkoper doesn't need more levels, but need and want are very different words in the English language.
Yes, they
He would
absolutely
be
are.
perfectly happy being at 888.
Oh, sure, yeah. Also, just love to point out that we talked about the sudden need for Fairy. He literally got that magic jar. The next room was Fairy required. It was unfortunately not required to go this way whatsoever, but it just shows you exactly the kind of thing that you were talking about.
And here's the other Fairy requirement right here. So the good news with this is jkoper now knows that he's not going to have to suddenly cast Fairy again in Palace 6.
Yep, that was the last one. Everything else you can just immediately land on. That narrow passage you can't angle to the right and get to from the top. You have to cast Fairy mid-drop.
Yeah, there is a trick where you can make... Well, I guess from that particular drop spot, I don't know if you can, probably not, but the trick to even make that drop, it's really tough, actually. You gotta just hit the angles perfectly from most possible drop locations.
And I believe traiLZ is about to get his Fire and Thunder spell. If memory serves, which admittedly mine is not great, so... meanwhile, jkoper is about to have himself a barbecue.
Yeah, and in terms of the jkoper experience extravaganza here, he's probably not getting his level here. Barba could be worth 1,000, but if he's worth anything else, then it's just not going to happen.
Buzz Thunder Flute is required. It is guarding 1.
Now, a big question for jkoper is he going to go back into 6 and dig for this item? We know it's something he doesn't need, but jkoper doesn't know. For all he knows, this is Flute, and he has explored a lot of 6 already.
Yeah, but I think that he is definitely going back in, because he took that level, but he's still going back in. It seemed for a second like he was considering not getting that level, going to Magic 7 or Attack 6.
Yeah, he was
going back in.
He was considering taking or stalling the level just to get Attack 6. I'm gonna guess the main thing he thought better of it is what am I even doing this for? I'm going to get Attack 6 from the next boss anyway. And that's probably more experience efficient to just take this now.
Very true. traiLZ is going back to the Eastern Continent, once again leaving that glove behind. And that's becoming the tale of this so far. Like, obviously, Flute is the major missing item for jkoper, which we know is blocked by spell. And jkoper is definitely diving into palaces, but he's also finishing palaces. Meanwhile, traiLZ is blocked completely from finishing off 6, or even really getting far in 6 without that glove.
Yeah, it's really a question of what happens first. Does jkoper get through 3 and 6 completely and go pick up the flute, or does traiLZ go back to the hunt for the medicine cave? Surely he realizes that he didn't see it and there's still a missing item in the west.
Everything that he has done so far indicates that he does not realize that that's missing. He knows that he has Fire and Thunder on his hands. But he is not and if you know that, then why not look for it? He has every tool in the arsenal to find a missing cave.
I guess at this point, what items does traiLZ even have left to find? He hasn't attempted 3. He has this item in 1 he's assuredly going to get, and 1's really fast, so it's a very small cost.
Absolutely.
And he has that medicine cave, so traiLZ is about to find what he needs by everyone's favorite process, which is the process of elimination.
It's true, but at the same time, he needs to realize that he missed something in order to get there. And I don't know if he has anything remotely like that. Granted, who can think of anything in that bright pink dungeon? Oh my god. Well, my goodness, it's a bubblegum palace of fun.
This dungeon is more than secure enough to wear pink.
That's got to be disappointing for traiLZ. Sees that money, see that tea bag. There's no money in this game, which is a little weird for a Zelda game. That's how far the Ganon-scarred land has gone. The economy has collapsed. It's really quite sad.
jkoper is having a terrible time finding the item in Palace 6. This is really giving traiLZ a lot of time to find his mistake. He just found it now, but this has been a very long dig, and traiLZ is already done with P1.
Not exactly a challenge. And then, with his newfound Fire and Thunder, traiLZ will get his Magic 6.
jkoper just found the final heart container. He doesn't look at it as the final one, but we know the other one is in Death Mountain, and for jkoper's sake, hopefully he will never know that.
Yeah, surely he will think to check that spell spot.
Yeah, jkoper's probably just going to knock out 3.
Yeah,
because that'll complete the Western Continent in full, and then he'll check the spell spot, and then he'll feel really behind, but he might not actually be behind.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be behind until traiLZ realizes that he missed a cave on Western, and everything about his activity right now screams that he does not think that.
And kind of the other big thing for jkoper, like the dive into 6, he spent a lot of extra time there, but if you just look at what each runner has, it's a 1 clear versus a 6 clear, and even if you're just going for Barba, that 6 clear is way slower than a 1 clear.
Absolutely. Because just finding Barba in, it's not the most mazy, confusing, puzzly dungeon, but it's far from the least. And, it takes a little effort. Whereas 1 is basically gift wrapped. With a nice, shiny pink bow.
And 3 is typically a very straightforward and simple dungeon, but it's really likely traiLZ is about to run into a glove lock here.
Which probably
we're able to get the item without the glove, so traiLZ might just leave without trying to get to the boss.
Oh, and we have our final magic container as they both pick up at the same time. But yeah, traiLZ now knows that he missed something.
Yeah, and I totally agree with traiLZ up Aing there. Like, there is some possibility he could have gotten to Rebo without the glove, but based on what he'd already seen, it was extremely low probability. He would need every glove block room to be the left of this last fork here.
Yeah. And he's doing all the right things. He is re-exploring the Western chapter, or the Western continent. Basically, unfortunately, doing rechecks on a lot of things, but it's going to take him exactly to where he needs to be.
While jkoper's about to have his 3 clear, and jkoper is actually really close to being in GP. He just needs to kill Rebo here, get east, grab his flute, knock out 1, and he's just in GP.
Yeah, the only thing we got to hope for, and we both know jkoper really well, so we think it's very low possibility that he does not go into Death Mountain instead of checking spell.
jkoper already has spell, so I consider, like, it would honestly just be objectively a mistake.
Sure.
Death Mountain can be a super long dive, and he knows he can get that item.
And there is traiLZ picking up the glove, realizing his mistake now, and talk about feeling behind. traiLZ has got to feel absolutely behind at this point.
I mean, traiLZ probably has the thought, the second he found that glove, man, if I didn't mess up like that, I'd be done now. And honestly, knowing traiLZ, he might be right.
I think you might be absolutely correct with that as well. And jkoper is finishing up 3.
Yeah, this will get jkoper his attack 6, which attack 6 saves a lot of hits on Thunderbird. It's the threshold that I think a lot of older players wanted to feel comfortable. As people have gotten better at Zelda 2, people are comfortable at even lower attack levels, but 6 should be cozy.
Absolutely. Yeah, for a player of this caliber, yeah, jkoper will have no problem moving forward with 6, especially with that Fire Thunder spell, just, you know, basically free to spam.
Oh no, jkoper's going for DM.
Oh, God.
Or he failed to find DM and he's saying forget it and he's going for New Kasuda, which
Is the correct
this
play.
is the best navigation mistake jkoper could have made.
Yeah, we got to remember this for the post.
Yeah, jkoper is just looking for New Kasuda again. It was right around here. He will have it shortly. He'll have his flute and he'll feel really behind. We know he's actually ahead and he'll carry on.
Absolutely. There is an opportunity with traiLZ now having that final item, moving forward, knows exactly what he needs to do, just has to clear out 6 and 3. Not an easy task, but with the right Great Palace, you never know.
Yeah, like I said, jkoper's ahead, but he's not the world ahead.
Mhm.
He's ahead just enough that GP could easily swing this. He's just going to have a little advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot of it depends on how fast traiLZ can get through that Palace 6. Because it's not going to take jkoper long to blaze through Palace 1. And he will be in Great Palace well before traiLZ gets to Barba.
And of course, traiLZ also has to go back and finish P3. He knows the exact path, but it is just a lot of rooms.
Yeah. Oh wait, no, he's in 6, so he'll get to Barba first. I don't know why. Yeah. But definitely a couple minutes of advantage for jkoper at this point.
I do think traiLZ is... He's basically following jkoper's routing in 6, which is pretty meta routing. I think he's going to find Barba before too much longer.
Yeah, he's just got to drop down. Well, no, here's the thing. He doesn't have enough magic for Fairy. Oh, he does. I didn't think he did, obviously. That probably saved him like 3 minutes. If he hadn't been able to have enough magic to cast that spell, he would have kept on exploring down until... and eliminating everything else. So he just barely saved himself there.
In a honestly quite shocking development, the River Devil ended up being a convenient thing to remove, so it was kind of doing its job. You could boot around it, but it was a slower route.
And jkoper now using that newfound flute and unlocking the Pink Palace. Also a lovely museum I used to visit regularly in Memphis. Meanwhile, traiLZ is fighting Barba.
And jkoper had a relatively slow Barba fight. He played it very safe. I expect traiLZ to play this fight a lot more aggressively.
Even with one health bar left, absolutely went crazy on him. And is paid off with a 2-cycle.
Meanwhile, jkoper has found Horsehead, which I actually think jkoper's Horsehead took about the same amount of time as traiLZ Barba.
Which is a pretty slow Horsehead and a pretty fast Barba, but they are finishing up houses at the exact same time. And then traiLZ immediately upping to, as quickly as possible, get to Palace 3. He feels like he is incredibly behind. Like he's playing that way. Like, how could I have missed that glove?
Interesting experience situation. jkoper was basically able to pick what he wanted to level in between attack, magic, and life. He went for life 8. It was the most convenient, and it might have been the best. But just kind of a fun situation.
Yeah, I find that I'm not sure about that call. It's obviously very nice to be able to stay alive and healthy, but that extra magic level and that extra attack level, those are both just so handy to have in Great Palace, where jkoper now is.
I believe we are still on shortened GP in these flags, so GP can still be a bear, but the worst of what GP can be will not be demonstrated today, which, as the first one into GP, definitely works to jkoper's advantage.
Absolutely. Finds a drop immediately. Not the friendliest room in the world.
We have a
we
super
already-
early Thunderbird.
Absolutely.
Which,
Is this required Thunderbird seed? Because you said Thunder is required, so I'm guessing yes.
yes, this is very much a required Thunderbird seed, and the early Thunderbird is basically a sign that you could have a long dive for Darklink. There's this sort of guarantee with how Thunderbird works that he's always on a forced path to Darklink. Frequently, This means he's either shortly before Darklink or right at the beginning of the palace. When you get him in the middle, that's really a mercy because it cuts your search space a lot.
Right. So I was trying to remember, was there any divergent path before jkoper got here? I thought there might have been one, but I also was, if there was no divergent path, I wouldn't be terribly surprised. There was one left.
Yeah, I think he could have gone left out of the very first elevator. Going right led to the drop, and then right here. The fact that jkoper went right at the start shows that he's not super terrified of how
Wow.
Oh my word.
Yeah, so left is just a long, long line of junk. And right is the right way to go.
So yeah, a common thing to do when you go into GP believing you're behind is just take lefts, because the meta is to go right, and that can easily put you on the different path that will let you win from going into GP second.
Yeah, but
if jkoper had done that, he would have thrown this race really hard, because you go right and it's just the freest GP I've ever seen.
Absolutely. What was that, like 6 rooms? 7? Maybe? It's one of the shortest Great Palaces I've ever seen.
It's 6 rooms if you count the entryway?
Yeah. And traiLZ is placing his final crystal, but seeing the news that jkoper has completed the seed in first place with a time of 1 hour, 17 minutes, and 15 seconds.
traiLZ probably feels right now that he just lost by a lot. When he sees what GP is, he's going to realize he was actually pretty close.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think looking back and thinking about when he sees this great palace and he thinks about how much time he could have saved if he had had that glove, like with the right combination, this could have been close to an hour seed, if not sub.
Yeah, this seed, if you had made the decision to check what spell led to immediately, but also found the glove in your initial search, there's really no reason this couldn't have been a sub-hour seed. Everything lined up nicely. You might be scared about experience, but Fire Thunder will just take care of you.
Absolutely, and both of these runners kept on diving late palaces because they were each missing that one item and basically cleared out all they could. Yeah, like I'm fully convinced now this could have easily been a sub-hour seed if you pulled off both of those moves early. Unfortunately, each of them pulled off one. traiLZ, being absolute professional he is going to go ahead and finish this out. Don't want to leave a seed unfinished like this. And is going right. We'll see if he takes the drop. And room.
Yeah, like drop. I think most players at this point understand that early in GP, a drop is just extra desirable, so it would have been incredibly unlikely for traiLZ to be dissuaded by seeing that room.
Yeah. He's halfway through the palace already, folks. Hold on. He is in room 5 of 6.
Yeah, traiLZ is not surprised at all right now. Seeing T-Bird this early is super common. His jaw's going to hit the floor when he goes into the next room is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So traiLZ kind of took a somewhat bad hit at the start of the fight, but has transitioned into putting on a Thunderbird clinic.
Absolutely. This is elementary at this point. Oh.
Well, I just pulled a classic commentator's curse. Sorry,
and
traiLZ.
I followed you right off that bridge. But surely this is going to be it from now. With full health, 7 heart containers, 8 magic. This has got to be pretty elementary now.
I noticed traiLZ is going for some sneaky double hits with some of his moves. They're pretty difficult to pull off, but if you have that execution, which traiLZ does, you can save cycles on T-Bird, and it can really make a difference in a close race.
I hear the ping. jkoper has joined us. Congratulations.
Hey, thank you.
So how did you feel about seeing Darklink when you walked into that room?
I was just, completely shocked and very confused. I mean, obviously, it's clear what happens in that great palace.
I hear the ping.
But,
jkoper has joined us. Congratulations.
Wow. Yeah, that was something.
I was kind of joking about it. Did you feel behind when you saw the flute there?
Any more fucking
I don't know. I didn't waste a whole lot of time digging items.
I mean, that 6?
Yeah, 6, it was kind of like in the last possible place, but at least I had a fairly good read on it. And it was definitely, that definitely cost me the most time out of any of the item digs I did, I think.
Yeah. And traiLZ has now also defeated his shadow with a time of 1 hour, 22 minutes, and 16 seconds. In that 6-room GP. Wrong way.
Was it really as many as 6?
It was 6 rooms.
If you count the entryway, it was 6.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, because 1, go down, elevator, and then right for a drop, and then drop destination, Thunderbird, Darklink. So,
yep.
Yeah, was...
And then
mechanically, the shortest it could possibly be is 4, so 6 is pretty short.
Right.
And we are joined by traiLZ, GG traiLZ.
What's up, man? GG, thanks.
Hey, traiLZ, GG.
So
Yeah,
I'm going to guess traiLZ has a pretty clear idea of exactly what happened this seed.
I
Yeah,
believe
I would have finished sub hour if I would have found that glove. The seed was so damn free. T-Bird and Dark Link was in the first room. I mean, I spent the whole, I 100% of the seed. The only thing I didn't get was the heart container out of 6. That was
okay.
it.
Yeah.
I literally did everything in the whole game.
It was
Yep.
kind of interesting because you two made. Well, in your case, it was clearly a mistake forgetting about Medicine Cave. In jkoper's mistake, it was more, or situation, it was more of a decision. He didn't go and check the item that spell locked until he'd full cleared all the palaces in the west, and the dig for 6's item turned out to be a massive project.
Yeah, it was kind of in the last possible place. It probably just took me like, I don't know, another 3 minutes or so beyond defeating the boss. I didn't do much of Death Mountain at all, though. I guess that's probably the difference there. I just poked into a couple caves.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad of a Death Mountain as it turned out. traiLZ found both items relatively quickly, but nevertheless, that probably is most of the difference.
Nah, dude, most of the difference was me looking for the glove the whole seed.
Well,
I mean, if I would have found Medicine Cave,
Well, it
that would've
was your search for glove versus jkoper's search for flute. You both did a lot of stuff that you didn't need to do.
right. Nah, I mean, I understand if he found the flute, he would have probably finished a lot earlier too. I understand, but I was ready to put it in, you know, punch on the afterburners when I found Fire Thunder and I had all the spells. I had everything but the glove, and I literally did everything in the whole game. I searched every single palace. I did all Death Mountain. You know what I mean? I went into 6. I went into 3.
Yeah, you can tell the second that you had saved and quit out of that Palace 1, having found that item, and just started checking the Western Continent again. So that moment was very clear to us. It's like you realized that there was something that you had missed.
When I found the glove, I was done in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of the interesting thought I had that I guess jkoper didn't have this thought. I mean, traiLZ had somewhat easier decisions. He'd seen the dot done when he got to GP. But like if you felt behind going into GP and you decided to go left at the first branch to diverge, oh boy, that could have killed you.
Yeah, I mean, no one would have made that mistake, and I apologize, jkoper. I'm not trying to like discount you at all or your playing. I'm just saying that me personally would have been done a lot earlier had I found the glove. I spent a lot of time searching for the glove in the seed. I don't want you to. I mean, I'm salty, absolutely, but it's because of my own faults and my own mistakes. You know what I mean? Don't take me wrong or anything. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to be rude.
I mean, I didn't have too many problems finding the glove, so I guess that's part of the game is you know, exploring and finding the caves and whatnot. So
It was smack dab in the middle, and I walked, or you know, I did like the clockwise where you go around the continent clockwise and you hit all the caves. And I knew I knew I hadn't found Medicine Cave, but I kind of really wasn't thinking about it. I was kind of like, well, whatever. I have 2 item caves. I'll get back to them because I knew the one was boulder blocked, so I was like, you know, I'll go get the hammer, come back, and I still never found it. So I didn't really think anything of it, but you know, I dug the item out of 5. That took fucking forever. You know what I mean? I went into P6. You were quickly glove blocked, but P3 was one of the last things I did, and I don't know. I mean, I had a fortunate Palace 6. I found the boss rather quickly, but I don't know.
yeah, I also dug the item out of 5. That was the first palace I did, actually. But I thought it went fairly smooth, all things considered.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
guys kind of did it the opposite order. jkoper, you went for the item first, and then you kind of flowed to the boss, and you had a pretty good P5. Whereas traiLZ found the boss first, and then made a redive for the item.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably the same similar type of situation. I just held left found all the dead ends, up an aid, went up that elevator, and held left again, and eventually found the item. But I did search around the boss a little bit too.
Yeah, I can understand a little bit how you missed that medicine cave because you know, I found it the first time and I had 1 life left, and I was like, man, I don't want to commit to this right now because my levels weren't at that point where I really felt comfortable with who knows what was inside of medicine cave. So I put it off, and then when I tried to re-find it, that took me a second. Like I knew the general area, but this was a really weird map in the west for sure. It felt like it was separated into like 4 pieces instead of 2 usual. So that was weird.
I grinded Magic 5, I think, at the beginning because I thought you were fairy locked. You had to go through the fairy drop or whatever. And then I found that little area you could walk up on the east side. The little strip of water or whatever to get up there by the raft. But I grinded until I could cast fairy at first, and then I realized, you know, I could walk up the side.
Yeah, at least Magic 5 was useful with the Thunderfire. Because I didn't have very high magic when I first got it, so I ground a few magic levels after I found the Thunderfire.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, as I saw just how nasty it was to get out of that southern area in the start, I was kinda hoping it was a Death Mountain as a connector seed. That little sliver of water made me a bit sad.
Yeah, AA was very excited about the potential troll of this early West Continent. Yeah. And then you went around it. Not that we blame you whatsoever. Yeah. Any final thoughts from our runners today?
Yeah, just GG and good luck with the race against the winner of was it RCS and Dig Shake.
Absolutely.
That should be happening sometime soon. I don't know who I'm racing next. I gotta look at the bracket.
I'm sure it's not determined yet.
In fact, we are 2 rounds away from determining who is actually going to face you. We still need to get all of the matches from the round 3 of the losers bracket done, and then after the 4th round, we'll know who's facing you. But right now, it looks like it's going to be someone from this group: Thurwolf, Buzz Thunder, Unos, or Smitty Games.
That's cool. I can get a good race out of any of those guys.
Yeah, definitely some worthy opponents right there.
Alright, and these matches will be happening tomorrow, I believe, right? No. Actually... yeah, tomorrow. One of them, at least. My bad, sorry. Messed up the schedule.
Thanks for the restream and commentary and whatnot. It looks like one of our commentators had a timing issue, so thanks, Dom, for stepping in and helping out AA.
My pleasure. Glad to be a foil for AA's extremely large amount of knowledge about this randomizer. Glad to have been able to jump in.
Oh, you were great, Stom. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much.
But thank you guys for everything.
Yeah, thanks for a great race.
Oh yeah.
Forward to seeing the next one.
All right, thank you guys. See you later.
Alright, folks. I want to give a big shout out to our volunteers, to DHStorm, to Amazing Empress, to Jinxie Girl and Bleeding Blue on tracking, and of course to our 2 runners. It's 4 AM, so short exit pep talk by myself. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll be back tomorrow at 9 PM Eastern with Amazing Toaster vs. Letion. That's the losers bracket. Round 3, I believe, and we'll be back with that tomorrow. Thanks everyone for watching, and catch you later. Thank you, folks. I'm really tired.